Okay, thank you everyone for joining us for another in the Jane Irrigation Training Series. Today, we're going to be talking about design, maintenance, and management of landscape irrigation systems. And this is really kind of a big subject, right? Because more than ever, we find that water management and just water pricing is affecting people's use of their landscape, what they're planning, and what they're designing and building future-wise. So it's a big subject and a very interesting one. But we've got expert today in water to talk to us about this. It's Tom Raden, and Tom and I go way back, back to his days at UCLA in the 90s. And gosh, a few years ago, I hired Tom. I was very respectful of his knowledge and his abilities in water management. I hired him at Valley Crest a few years ago in Las Vegas. He was moving there. We had very fortunate that he was moving. And, after I hired him, I got a very angry call from the branch manager in the branch that Tom was a regional irrigation advisor for. And the branch manager said, you know what Tom did? And I said, what did he do? He said, Tom did an audit on our irrigation system here at the branch. And I knew then I had hired the right guy, right? And in this case, right, sometimes the cobbler's kids have no shoes, and we needed to pay a little bit more attention to the irrigation system at our branch. And what was great about this was it really got people involved in the branch, looking at the water, talking about it. It was the buzz, and it just raised the whole level of awareness of water management in one simple act. And I always thought that was the best thing that Tom could have done when he first started, and why he was so successful there. Tom's at par 3 now, and doing a great job for par 3 in Las Vegas. And Tom, a few years ago, I wrote a cover article about you and par 3 for Turf Magazine, and what you guys were doing to kind of really shake up the water industry. And that was selling water management as a service, as a separate line item, something nobody else was doing at the time. And you guys were even offering a water savings guarantee. So it's been a few years since I wrote that. And I just wanted to ask you, how did that go? How's that going? What's the situation there now?
Well, we're still doing well. So, and we have increased business and revenue based on water management. That was one of the things that I had brought to, or I thought I had brought to Las Vegas, is that water management is super important, and not everybody can do it, and it shouldn't be free. So that's the bottom line. So everybody says they do it, but they don't, because they don't charge for it. So one of the things that I tried to express is that, hey, if they're not billing you for it, you're probably not getting it. So but right now, as you mentioned, the price of water is increased dramatically in Las Vegas. Nothing like the rest of the country, but so it makes it difficult to present guarantees based on actual dollars. So what we're doing now is we're presenting water savings and plant health. So water management plays a big part in plant health. So, but again, we're doing quite well. A lot of our customers are very happy with just the plant health itself, and of course the water savings and the ROIs are still within that 24 to 36 month window. So it's been very beneficial for us.
Yeah. So one thing we were really successful at, Tom, was again, it doesn't matter if the maintenance fee was going to be a little bit more, as long as we could show the benefit of what we were doing, right? And that was the water management side. And our customers still receptive to that they'll pay more on a monthly maintenance because they think they're going to save some water and some money there. Correct.
Yes. And in some, you had mentioned, a separate line item. So in some of the maintenance contracts, of course, everybody says everything's included. But we add that water management process as part of the inclusive contract. And if you don't want the water management, then I guess the price can be cheaper. But for the most part, there seems to be much more environmental instead of economical sense or consideration in their maintenance contract.
Yeah, so part three, what a wonderful reputation you guys have. Best landscaping company. You hear this often in the Las Vegas area. So I'm guessing that a lot of your competition is following what you guys have been doing. Do you find that to be true, or do you find that they just don't have the expertise, so they're ignoring it?
It's twofold. I think, unfortunately, there are a lot of companies that are still price-based, so rather than service. And that's one of the reasons why I came to part three, is that they are service-based. They want to be the #1 professional in the Las Vegas Valley. So, they have invested considerably in water management, marketing that service to customers, and again, it's been beneficial. Unfortunately, as well as I do, there are very few people that actually manage water and manage water properly. So thus, part of this webinar is going to focus on the education and the importance of water.
Yeah, so Tom, you're probably, you're getting all the tough questions right off the bat. Sorry, but again, coming from you and such a reputable firm, it's great. So one of the long-standing, it's like the Hatfields and McCoys of landscaping is the sometime adversarial relationship between contractors and designers. And, you talk to the designers and they sometimes complain that, well, I designed it a certain way, but the irrigation wasn't installed the right way. Talk to the contractor, well, the designers don't always know how the products work. So, we're adjusting in the field. So one of the keys, of your success was actually really understanding the design and what's happening. So you want to talk to us a little bit, or, give some of the other contractors and water managers some ideas of what you're looking at in design?
Well, one of the things that I have found is, especially with drip. Now, coming from California, and that's where I got most of my training as a contractor. When I got out here, I found that a lot of the drip irrigation designs, a lot of it comes from California, and it's somewhat vague and not specific in nature. And so, again, like you said, I'm going to throw in the other factor in all of this, and that's how about the guy that's installing it? So sometimes they don't quite look at the specification page. There's not really a diagram or a detail on how subsurface. Sometimes there's not a diagram on emitter placement for certain size plants. You'll see a detail that says, put 8 emitters on a 24-inch box tree or a 36-inch box tree, and put in this type inline tubing with row spacing of 24. And even the concept of header and footer in an inline tubing installation is unfathomable to most of the guys in the field that are installing. So we find that doing a simple diagram like you have on the screen that kind of shows it laid out rather than in words, how it should be done, the installer usually gets it right. So, this is just a simple detail that we use that we could put in the field for a job that we did on some very mature sumac trees. That's literally, I was going to say, previous to this grid setup, there were 4 2-gallon 8-liter emitters on each tree. And so nothing outside in the drip line or where the tree really needed to have water. So we proposed this. The owner was super happy that we were looking at, again, this is plant health right here. This is not water management, because we're actually going to be using about 5 or 6 times more water for these trees, but they are going to be much healthier. So
Tom, when a contractor gets in that situation, you recommend, and it's vague, right? Sometimes it's really vague. Pick up the phone, call the designer. What are some of the things that you maybe did earlier in your career, to help with this?
Well, to be honest, I just did my research. So, I have the ability at this point now to have, many years of experience behind me. So, I'm always open to, anybody's opinion on how things need to be done. But I've also not just taken them for truth, and done some research on plant watering, plant health, irrigation systems. The funny thing is this exact kind of layout is in Jane's catalog. And so I call the irrigation catalog the Bible, because I could always go to that for those resources and to determine what the best way of setting up an irrigation system is. Right.
And I know you also know you can call the manufacturer's representative, right? I know you've called Andy many times, me a few times, and this is sometimes a good source of information too.
Yeah. The other thing too is that I suggest to anybody and everybody that wants to take water management to the next level, to look to people like the Irrigation Association. I've been a landscape water auditor since 1991. So, and I practice and unfortunately preach everything that I've learned over the years and discovered. And there are some trial and error, issues. This slide here, I'm not sure why, but everybody thinks that point drip emitter needs to be right up on the root, the crown of the plant. And you can see on the left where the emitter is actually washed away the soil and the plant itself. The one on the right is atypical, what most people in the industry think a tree needs to have, and that's 10 emitters all within a foot of the trunk and in a big circle. So unfortunately, this particular tree, you can see from the shadow, is not doing that well. And it might very well be from having too much water around the trunk, around the crown. So.
Yeah, you can certainly see in that photo on the left, crown rot could be a big issue there. If it isn't today, it's going to be, right?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. So, and I know that this particular shrub happens to be a, cover, the canopy on it's got to be at least 4 square feet or more. So it's really, really needs some irrigation out, at least 12 inches out from that crown. So.
Yeah. So what do you recommend for drip irrigation for trees in the Las Vegas area?
For trees? So especially if they're newly planted, the other thing that is missing in new construction is that most of the time the emitters are right on the edge of the box or container, where the container part of it or the root ball touches native soil. And what we do now is we take a minimum of at least 2 emitters and we fold them over and put them right on top of the root ball. And then we irrigate out from there in a triangular pattern, depending on the size of the tree, 2 to 4 feet. And so that you can actually wet the soil outside of the root ball and keep that root ball wet, kind of keep it alive, and then give it a place to chase some water and move some roots outside.
So great. So does this, I was wondering if this, this slide actually showed the correct placement, but maybe not.
It does. It actually does. So if you look at it, we actually laid this out as an expansion for some pine trees that were kind of struggling a little bit, and we explained to the technician what we wanted, and this is where I get to where we need to make sure that everybody is educated, because there is a third party in that equation. Not only do you have the designer, you have the contractor, and then you have the installer. And so in some cases, the installer decides that they want to do it what they've learned over the years or have always done for many, many years, and that is put emitters where the red flags are. The white flags actually indicate where the emitters need to be. So you notice that we've moved everything, excuse me, out away from the crown and out underneath the drip line where we want to promote and make sure that the rest of the root system gets water. So pine trees are in a category of its own as far as water requirements and emitter placement and such. But this is typically how we would do it in the field. Excuse me.
Yeah, good. Thank you. So, so this is interesting, right? Very important on the trees, which oftentimes are the most valuable asset in the landscape, right? Nobody wants to pay. Nobody wants to pay to have a 30-year-old tree replaced, or a 10-year-old for that matter.
Yes, yes, and
So,
it is whether it be in Las Vegas or even in California when I come and visit, you do see a lot of stressed trees. And I think a lot of it is attributed to just water placement. You know, what is actually healthy for the plant, so, or the tree.
yeah, that, and also I see a lot of trees being on the same valve as the turf or the shrub that happens to be right next to it, and we get some watering issues from that.
Right, right. Well, and when we look at, basically 5 different scenarios for watering. Obviously turf is, shallow rooted, but all of the hydrozoning that we do or valving that we do, valve systems, is primarily based on root depth, root size, root zone. It's really important to not only know what your root zone is in the field, but also know what is that plant's root zone, typical root zone. And so a lot of trees don't necessarily go down 10, 20 feet like a pine tree does. So, a pine tree's got a root zone that goes, what do they say? It's supposed to mirror a conifer, what a conifer looks like. And so the root zone goes down that 10, 15 feet. Whereas you look at a Palo Verde or mesquite, and that root zone's not necessarily going to be at that, depth of 10 feet. It's going to be maybe 3 feet. So, and we can often, we don't necessarily separate desert plant material or native plant material or trees, like say a Palo Verde or mesquite, from a shrub area. What we will do is we'll increase the emitter size so that the water will actually go down a little farther. So the root zone, again, is what is the current root zone? what should that tree or shrub's root zone be. So that you have to take that into consideration when you're laying out the emitter spacing, emitter size, etc.
And when you say emitter size, what you're referring to is 1 gallon per hour, 3 gallons per hour. Is that right?
Correct. Correct. Yes, because obviously, if you want a 3 gallon per hour, the same amount of time as a 1 gallon per hour, the 3 gallon per hour is going to go 3 times as deep or close to. It's going to cover 3 times as much area. So.
Yeah. We've got one question from our audience this afternoon, and that is, what about building circles, multiple circles around as the tree matures? Is this a good practice?
It is. However, what I've seen, and I have a couple of really good pictures of it, but those we call them tree rings, and I know in the first slide, we presented tree rings around pine trees, and what I've seen in the past is that tree rings, you open them up and you've got 3 or 4 rings around a tree that are all 6 inches apart, the rings. So yes, if you want to put that first ring in at about 18 inches from the trunk, 12 to 18 inches from the trunk, and then go out a couple of feet per ring. I think in our normal practice at part 3, we come out 2 feet separation in each ring to a minimum of 70% of canopy. So obviously in this case, there are hardscape limitations to this, and there actually is shrub irrigation, undergrowth irrigation that will help with the pine tree. So
yeah, and it actually sounds like a pretty decent business plan too, to be consistently for your customers adding a ring and removing a ring potentially as the tree grows.
Correct. It is. So.
Well, Tom, tell us a little bit about drip and turf. Is this something you guys have been doing a little of, a lot of? How's it work? What's your experience there?
So it's interesting because prior to me coming out to Las Vegas, I heard a lot about subsurface turf irrigation, and a lot of it was going in out here, and a lot of it got ripped out out here. And then when I arrived in 2014, we tried a couple of projects. I was new to it, of course. Some you do well at, some you fail at. So, but I do know that back in the early 2000s, medium or soil type was a huge factor in doing subsurface turf. So nowadays, not so much, but we have several projects, very high-end projects with tens of thousands of square feet of turf that are all subsurface. The key to it is twofold, and that is auto flushing, because you need that inline to flush all the time. And because our water is so hard out here, we do some fertigation, and it's not really fertigation injection, but we inject a mild acid twice a year in the winter, typically when we're not getting a lot of growth, but in the winter and the summer, just to break down the calcium deposits in the drip system. So, but we have had good luck. A lot of people that have failed have placed that drip line too close to the surface or too far from the surface. So again, the soil medium is the key. Knowing what your wicking rate is going to be, how much is that water going to move through the soil. One of my great friends who happens to work for you is an agronomist, and I am going to be learning many things from him over the next few years. So, but hi, Andy.
So it's good to hear, right? It's good to hear that you've got quite a few high-end projects working this. I know we were involved in a soccer stadium at a college where subsurface strip has gone in for the turf there, and we're seeing this more and more. And like you say, we're learning more and more about it, and we're having more and more success as we go along. And that's really great.
It's, you know, for turf, it should be a no-brainer when you look at the distribution uniformity, which is probably the most important thing for turf. 90% plus, whereas spray heads are down in the 50, 60%. So the efficiency of using subsurface drip for turf is huge. But again, it needs to be done right. So it can't just be slapped in and, oh, I have subsurface drip. So.
Right. So, and then one of the things you're really alluding to that's really important, right? We know that maintenance of these systems is big. And, I know early on in my career, when I started one of my contractors, well, did you clean the filter? What's the filter look like? And he was trying to remember if he had a filter on there. And I said, I know you had the filter on there. You bought it. And maybe I haven't cleaned it in all these years, right? So maintenance really becomes critical. And that was an example of something really bad. But what do you do about maintenance for these strip systems?
Well, and you are absolutely correct. Maintenance is, again, so the simple fact that we're talking about subsurface drip right now, it's out of sight. And so I've often said, do you wait for the check engine light to come on before you check the oil?
Yeah.
And so why don't we at least quarterly check that filter, make sure it's cleaned. Usually when I check a valve box and the filter's bad, it's usually not in the Y strainer, it's in the box because it was plugged up. And so and nobody took the time to clean the filter, wash it, put it back in. And it's hugely important because drip systems are susceptible to clogging. Same thing with flushing. I will say it's not a part of irrigation system maintenance that's regularly looked at. Usually there's a problem. The service engine soon light comes on, and then we're flushing that line and we're checking the filter and making sure that the valve is actually working from the controller. I've heard so many times that, oh yeah, if I manually turn it on, everything comes on. Did you try it from the controller? No. So when it comes to irrigation maintenance, it just needs to be done. It's super important.
I just want to make the point too. I think I heard you say this now. Irrigation maintenance on a drip system isn't like a daily or weekly thing either, right? What we see is people neglect it for years and then they have a problem. But regular, and what's regular, and so we always recommend automatic flush valves in every line. We actually see not enough of them, but that should be a given. Cleaning your filter, like you say, quarterly. So it's really not hard to do, right?
It's not. However, so I just reviewed a property, 17 controllers, 305 valves, calculated approximately, 150,000 emitters. And so, and if you look at each valve, you've got to go to, 600 flush caps to flush each line out. So, and a lot of times, and it's unfortunate, Richard, that, time is what? Money. And so, even though your landscape maintenance contractor says, "Oh, we do it," they're probably not. So, and like you said, there are probably drip irrigation systems out there that haven't been flushed in 5 years. So, this slide is actually a Fantex ash tree that you see all the rock. That was a turf conversion in Las Vegas where we remove all our turf. It had a ring of emitters placed just a little bit outside of that block border. But, and I will say, this is actually at my house, so this is how I can get away with this. But all of a sudden, the health of the tree was just deteriorating fast. And so what I did is I actually resurrected the turf valve with 4 rotary nozzles. I was a little bit lazy. I should have put subsurface in, but inline. But that being said, this is now the tree, and I'm currently watering it 5 hours every 10 days. People can't fathom the fact that that tree's not getting watered every day. But I'm reaching the root zone and the expanded root zone, and I do water. I was just checking the system to make sure everything was working fine, but I do water it in the middle of the night so nobody gets mad at me for watering rocks. So, but yes, I'm watering rocks.
Yeah, well, it certainly looks healthy, that's for sure.
And it was really just amazing to me what just the right kind of water, takes. This slide here is it's a little bit difficult to see some of the printing on it, but this is an example where we have the same valve with different plant types and root zones, whereas using different size emitters based on the root depth. So the larger, blacker emitters are actually 2 gallon per hour emitters. All the blues are 1 gallon an hour emitters because they've got that plant material's got shorter root zone. And you notice I personally like to put 4 emitters, minimum of 4 emitters on a plant, unless it's a barrel cactus. But for the most part, I like to do that. And then emitter spacing on, was a boxwood hedge around this rose garden. And again, the emitters don't need to be on the trunk of every plant. And that's what was there prior to us changing this. But 18 inches apart. You just, and it doesn't matter whether it's right on top of the plant or not, just move it out away from the plant and you're going to, wet the soil where the roots are.
Yeah, so really, to help us out here, this is really all one zone, right? One valve.
Yes, it is.
And you are taking your water management to the next step by using a supply tubing with varying amounts of gallons per hour per emitter, and you're managing the water on a per plant basis this way.
Correct.
Yeah.
Correct. Again, based on the root depth and the root zone. So, and
Yeah.
again, I can't, I can't say enough times that it's really important to understand what your current root zone is, what your root zone should be. And this is going to apply also to anybody that's looking to do smart irrigation. Smart irrigation is based on root zone, root depth, rate of application, etc. And so, and again, also, application placement. I'm not going to say emitter placement, but application placement. It's super important to take all of that into consideration and make sure that you're watering not only where the existing root zone is, but just a little bit beyond, so that you have somewhere for any root growth to pick up water. So
yeah, so this is a lot of thoughtfulness and care and consideration into this water management here, and it's what I'd like to have, you know, in my landscape. So that's great to see, Tom. So okay, so this slide we're talking about pressure does matter, right? And so what do you mean by that here?
well, so a lot of times, so drip irrigation wet check means you look at the landscape, and if the last 5 plants in the row are dying, then most likely you've got a pressure issue. So we've come up with, and it's actually a very simple. Gosh, I hope that Jane doesn't sell one of these. But anyways, go down to Home Depot, get yourself a little pressure gauge, and get a little adapter that. A barbed adapter that'll fit on a piece of 1/4-inch drip tubing, and you turn your irrigation on and check the pressure. And so I know that there's some more sophisticated ways to do it, but for the most part, this is what we use. All of our techs have these. They can go to the end of the line and actually put a pressure gauge. You just pull the emitter off the spaghetti, put the pressure gauge on it, and you can see what that working pressure is down at the end of the line. So, and it really does matter. It's so many times I've seen a guy just, you know, cut the emitter off and say, oh, look, there's water coming out of the tube. It must be working. And it really isn't. Most drip emitters require a specific amount to open up, especially if they're pressure compensating. They need to have, you know, I believe it's a minimum of 10 pounds. Not sure. So, but this is another interesting thing that I've seen out here, and that is when checking pressure. Do you have a pinch in a line? Or in this case, what he's actually pulling out of that blank tubing is roots.
Wow.
And yeah, and so this is minimal. I have seen a 3/4-inch poly tubing completely clogged by root growth. And so and this is blank emitter tubing. It's not inline tubing, so it's not coming in through the emitters. To be honest with you, I'm not sure exactly where it's coming in, but this is another demonstration of just being able to check your irrigation system. And again, a wet check for us is simply looking at the plant material. It'd be impossible to look at, you know, 100,000 emitters on a property to make sure that there's water coming out. So we try to train all of our, not only our irrigation people, but our maintenance people to keep their eyes open.
Yeah.
You know, irrigation techs on a property for, you know, a couple hours a week, and that's just 2 eyeballs. You've got a maintenance crew out there or an on-site guy out there. They need to learn how to notice that that there is stress plant material.
Yeah, and a process for reporting it, right?
Absolutely, yes.
Yeah.
That, you know, and that's even more important is that process of reporting it. You know, being able to either get on the phone, send a picture, do something, just so that somebody knows at minimum before it dies.
Right.
Yeah.
So Tom, we really have just time for one more question today. And this is another tough question. I started with the hard ones. I'm finishing with the hard ones. You know, for all the contractors that are out there watching today, what advice do you have to help them get over the low bid customer and help nudge that customer to value instead of low bid?
Well, I think that it starts with, at least with us, it starts with the relationship with the the account manager. When you do that property walk, give that explanation. We try to educate our maintenance managers as much as possible so that when there is a dead plant, they're not just saying, okay, I'll replace it. Or if they're, we try to include irrigation upgrades or irrigation expansions whenever there's extra plant material going in. So when you, as a maintenance account manager, what I'm going to say is, there's a reason why that turf is dead, or there's a reason why that plant is dead. Don't just replace the plant or the turf. Figure out why. 9 times out of 10, it's the irrigation. You need to propose the irrigation repair or replacement before you put any new plants in. So, and that's, and explaining to the customer that, water really is the essence of landscape. Without water, I say this all the time, without water, you have no plants. Without any plants, you have nothing to trim. Without nothing to trim, you don't have a business. So the focus on water needs to be much greater than trimming the bushes. I know it's that component that's out of sight that nobody wants to talk about, or you can't see it. So why am I putting new irrigation in? I want to put pretty flowers in because everybody can see the pretty flowers. But just remember that without water, you don't have pretty flowers.
Yeah, and really, if you think about it, in Las Vegas or California, the number of homes that were going in the early 90s was an amazing amount, right? And all those homes now and their irrigation systems, and 1990 doesn't seem that long ago, but we're talking 30 years on an irrigation system with probably not very many people or HOAs or property managers accruing money to redo the irrigation system.
Yes, and I have run into that out here. How much do you have in your reserves for irrigation? It's to redo all of the irrigation, which is currently 25 years old, is going to cost you $500,000. $500,000. I got like $40,000 in the bank, in the reserve. So, yeah. And again, with drip irrigation, the lifespan is it depends. It definitely depends on the quality of the product. So that's why we do like Jane. Got to plug you a little bit there, Richard, but we do like Jane because it's a quality product, and in 25 years. It's going to look like it's 10 years old. Other products that are the cheapest may last 1 or 2 years. So it is truly a huge investment when you are using a quality product. It will double, maybe even triple that lifespan. And so when you're talking about having to spend $500,000 every 20 years, you want to make sure that it's going to last for as long as it possibly can.
Yeah, that's really nice of you to say, Tom. Thank you. And what we're seeing is more contractors coming forward and saying, and at this price, we're also going to install Jane quality products, and as a result, you're going to get a longer life out of your system. And I think the value buyers are seeing that, and they're jumping at that opportunity because they know replacing these things every few years is a terrible pattern to go on.
Well, and Richard, I have to snicker a little bit because you're talking about properties and irrigation systems going in 30, 35, 40 years ago, and I remember years ago when somebody was asking me, well, how long does PVC last? I'd say, 40 or 50 years. And that's pretty much the lifespan of PVC pipe. But now I'm actually old enough to see some of those jobs that went in 40 or 50 years ago, where the PVC is actually at its end of life. Yeah. So it doesn't really last forever. So.
Yeah, and then so I said that was going to be the last question, but one last question, Tom. I'm just wondering the adoption of smart controllers in the marketplace. Are you seeing a lot of people asking for these, or is it something we still have to sell?
Well, so I'm going to say there are a lot of people asking for it. The unfortunate part is obviously not for par 3 because I work there and we've actually trained most of our people on the benefits of smart controllers, but the problem is out in the industry, like everything else, people are putting smart controllers on the wall. And I may have even gotten this from you, Richard, a smart controller on the wall with a dumb operator is still a dumb controller. Yeah. And that's, typically what's happening out there. I wouldn't say a huge percentage of the time, but I think people are starting to realize, again, the benefits to watering smartly is much greater than anybody anticipated.
Yeah. Well, like you said early on, education is key. Yes. And certainly these irrigation training series are part of the education. We've got tons of video tools and one-on-one training that we can supply, and fortunately, a lot of the contractors are coming around taking the training, and we're seeing a big increase. So that's the really good news for the industry, because, like you said, without the water, we don't have plants, and without the plants, we don't have an industry. And
as I said earlier, the beginning of my career was research. Education on my part. You can't just walk up and say, hey, I'm now a smart irrigation contractor just because you put a sign on the side of your truck. You really need to put in the effort to understand it. Yeah, really good point. Well, Tom, thanks so much for spending this time with us today. This was really informative, and as usual, I learned something every time I'm around you, so thank you for being a part of this, and thank you to all our attendees that came out and participated today. We look forward to seeing you. Maybe, Tom, we'll have you back in a month or two, and it feels like we just kind of brushed the surface today. So, we did, yes. So, hopefully you'll come back and we can get into a lot more of the water management that we need to talk about. So anyway, thanks again, Tom, and thanks to all of you for tuning in today. And remember, all of our irrigation training series are on our website at janesusa.com. You can check them out there. And thanks again, and we'll see you all soon. Thank you. Thank you, Richard. Bye.